we solve the problem of knowledge walking out the door when someone retires or changes jobs. And we elevate everyone to the level of a star performer so they can all do sort of the best practices of the top performers.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Founders in LA podcast. I'm your host Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight through a product lens on some of the exceptional founders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one-take organic conversation. With us today is Joe Rogers. Joe, thanks for coming down to the studio.
Great to be here, Ethan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. I'm excited to have you here, man. But first, a word from our sponsors. Founders in LA is brought to you by Nearshore. Nearshore is a trailblazer in nearshore outsourcing and staff augmentation. With over 15 years of experience offering exceptional Latin American software development, data, product, and design talent for U.S. projects, Nearshore has revolutionized the way that companies scale their teams. They stand apart with 50% female leadership, are trusted by companies large and small, and have been helping U.S. customers grow since before nearshoring was cool. Discover how Nearshore can power your tech goals and help you stay lean while scaling fast. Learn more at www.nearshore.com. That's www.neasure.com. We're also brought to you by United Club. United Club is the co-working space that sets itself apart. With locations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, and Hermosa, United is where creativity flourishes. Unlike traditional offices, they offer inspiring environment where ideas can thrive and businesses can grow. With United, there's no hidden fees, flexible terms, options for dedicated offices, and unlimited access to conference rooms, a photo studio, this podcast studio, plus standard 3D printers, and 24/7 access at any of their locations. They're local champions who support neighborhood businesses, open their event spaces to nonprofits, and celebrate art, music, and culture. Join United Club and experience co-working like never before. Learn more at www.unita.club. That's www.unita.club. Our guest today is Joe Rogers. He is the CEO of Workdone.ai. Hey, Joe, can you just give us a 30-second description of Workdone?
Sure. Yeah, Workdone, the tagline is consulting automation for enterprise optimization. The longer explanation is I have been consulting to Fortune 1000 companies over the last 20 plus years across like 10 countries and major multinationals. And one day I had the realization as to how I could automate myself as a consultant. So that was the genesis for Workdone. What we've done is sort of captured our expertise and knowledge and created an AI corporate memory that identifies and diagnoses the problems of a client, generates solutions, and deploys the automation or efficiency. So our patented expertise capture identifies the best practices and then empowers the individual workers to perform at the level of the top performers. So in a nutshell, we solve the problem of knowledge walking out the door when someone retires or changes jobs, and we elevate everyone to the level of a star performer so they can all do sort of the best practices of the top performers.
I love so many parts of that. First of all, I do love the goal of putting yourself out of a job. I always have, there's a dating app called Hinge, and like their tagline is they're an app that's meant to be deleted. I had a former boss who used to say a great manager like gets to a point where he doesn't need to be there anymore because the team just knows how to build. I imagine having spent the time as a consultant going to these companies, you kept facing not the same problem because every situation is different, but there were patterns that you must have picked up on, and you were just like, hey, we could automate this. I just see the same problem over and over again. There's slight changes to it, but I see opportunities to just kind of, put it, not an autopilot, but put in some situation where they can automate some of these tasks I do so I don't have to start fresh every single time.
Absolutely. And earlier on in my career, I did a lot of accounts payable projects, and then did some like insurance claim processing projects, and then sort of a credit card application processing. And I started to see similarities across all of them, even they're completely different industries or functions. Usually there's some thing, some object, some piece of work comes in to start the process. Data is extracted, and then there's like a system of record, whatever it's ERP or CRM or whatever, and that data goes in there. And obviously the human, there's a lot of knowledge and experience that goes into how to do it, but at a high level, there's the same process. There's review, there's cut back, we got to wait for this. And, okay, now that this is in, we got to send this off. And so the business logic varies. But if you separate the business logic from the actual like flow of the work and then what the humans are doing, it's possible to create sort of a generic work processor to handle these different use cases. So that's one piece of what we're doing. And then the other thing is, as a consultant, there's, a customer will say, you know what, we need help with this. Now, as a consultant coming in, we just nod and smile and say, yes, we understand. But then we actually figure out what the real problem is, despite what they say the problem. And then if the problem is the same, great. But frequently it's a different problem. And part of the trick is getting them to realize what the real problem is without us telling them, so they adopt it, take ownership of it. And then it's sort of like, okay, now we do this needs assessment or requirements gathering. And a lot of that often requires going to the people that are doing the work and sort of shadowing them, looking over their shoulder. What are you doing here? What are you doing there? Why are you doing this? It's horrible because, these people have been working there 5, 10, 20, 15 years. And then they see the consultants coming in suits and everybody sits up straight and tries to look busy. And it's just the most disruptive experience. And that, I've been that consultant many times. It reminds me of the movie Office Space.
I was thinking that in my mind as you're doing with Bob and Bob.
Yeah, exactly. So what Workdone does is we don't have to set foot on site. We can basically observe the business process remotely by putting a little piece of software on the desktop. There's no UI. There's no training required. People just keep working the way they've been working. And we watch the work come in. We watch the knowledge worker process the work. We capture the outcome and determine the best practice around processing specific types of work. And that's what we call expertise capture. And then we store that in the customer's corporate memory. So it is their specific operation. It's like how they do. That's how they pay their invoices, not necessarily the company next door. And it's definitely not the situation which is the norm where, say, you implement NetSuite or some big SAP, some big ERP system, and then you have to bend your business processes to work the way the software works. This is quite the opposite. We're learning how you work and observing what the knowledge worker is doing on the glass in between the systems, and then capturing that and retaining that. So the knowledge doesn't walk out the door when somebody retires or changes jobs.
Wow. So there's several pieces to this that I enjoy. So from the product perspective, I love that you guys are, it's a common theme that we've had on this podcast before, is meeting folks where they're at. So instead of forcing them to bend to these, coming and say, hey, we've observed what you guys are doing. We think you can make some changes, which literally is your job as a consultant. But instead of saying, hey, we have these like best practices you guys should try to learn yourself, it's, hey, we've seen what you're doing. We can continue to guys coming close to what you're doing with slight modifications and saying wholesale, hey, here's a new system, learn this. In terms of in the world of software development, I just think of agile development and this concept that I've seen as, just call it flavors of agile, because there's agile software development doesn't exist in its pure form anywhere outside of some great books, but everyone seems to be managing to get software out the door. Some are more efficient than others, but instead of saying, hey, you're doing it totally different, and modifying to your flavor, understanding, here's how you work, here's how we think we can make you more efficient with minimal changes to the workflow, with minimal changes to your day-to-day and disruption to your people.
Sure. Well, say there's 10 people, processing claims. There's a function, a process, and then there's activities, and there's tasks. And worker one might be really good at one aspect, and worker two might be good at a different aspect. So we can identify who's good at what, and then surface all those and socialize them. Just literally have them talk about it with each other, so they can all use those tricks that maybe the person sitting next to them doesn't know. If you hit Alt-Tab, it'll take you to the next window or whatever,
Yeah.
It can literally be something as simple as that. So there's a lot in what you just said. We want to certainly meet them where they're at and take advantage of the best practices amongst them, and that there's a lift there, and that's kind of where we start. But in this time of especially Gen AI, we don't want to stop there. We want to, while we're monitoring, we actually sort of can come up with foundation, like this is where we're starting and this is where we want to go. Now, people have been doing this work for 10, 20, 30 years the same way. Let's model, let's simulate some new ways to do this that perhaps we haven't thought of before. And Gen AI is really good at that. And then we can actually come up with a new workflow and then simulate it and say, oh, if this goes the way we see it, simulate, we'll save this much in terms of time per transaction, in terms of labor costs. And then once it's iterated on, we can then deploy it. So what I've described so far was the front-end assessment, where we just monitor in the background and feed a dashboard to show a number of process health, green, yellow, red, opportunities for improvement. Say we see something yellow or something red and we suggest a fix for it, and the customer wants to move on to that, move forward with that. That is basically an upsell for us to a managed service. So we have a back-end workflow engine leveraging RPA, robotic process automation. We're partnered with Microsoft using their Power Automate tool, and then we use APIs. So basically, our proprietary IP, our engine creates prompts to generate the automation to do the interface between, say, maybe a MailChimp and a Salesforce, or the endpoints are completely open. We're SaaS first, but we can do on-prem as well. But the idea being, it'll generate the efficiency to get the data from here to there. Whatever the human is doing, they don't have to do that anymore. They can go do something else, something higher value add, more strategic.
Could we double click into that automation, kind of the open-ended automation? You're saying it was able to identify the hooks for which you could set up a process across different apps?
Yeah, it's kind of like the glue in between the apps. Where if you're watching a knowledge worker, they might have a couple monitors and they're using different tools, and we're not replacing any of those tools. We're actually capturing what's happening in between and storing that and then automating that. So it's what the human is doing.
How did you find yourself here? So you were a consultant for years, but do you have an inkling that you're gonna? I guess you were an independent consultant.
Yeah. Well, so it's kind of how much time do we have? It literally starts in college. I went to Harvard at 14, summer school, and then enrolled as a freshman at 16. And I was
Harvard University
College, Cambridge, Mass.
Wow. All right.
And even though I grew up in Santa Ana down the road, I was young, much younger, and I realized it. So the year before my senior year of college, I took off, and I actually came out and was couch surfing in Sawtell area, West LA. Yeah, and I went to a temp agency, and they sent me on a 2-day job to a company called FileNet. And FileNet at the time had pioneered sort of document imaging and workflow and moving images from desk to desk. Nobody had done it before. And I worked in LA that year off. I worked out of their Boston office during my last year of school. And I taught myself the technology sort of in the evenings on the demo system. And when I came back to LA, they had a customer in Beverly Hills, an insurance company that needed some help. So that was the beginning of my sort of career. It was more of a contract programming gig, but then I ended up building a small consultancy, and then built a software company that was very much a learning opportunity. I made every mistake possible there, but and then I went back to consulting, and myself and a couple other FileNet consultants, we formed a company called RGB Projects, which IBM bought FileNet, so then we became an IBM business consultant. And so we still do IBM projects to this day, actually subcontract directly to IBM for some internal projects. I personally sort of pulled away from that a little bit to do this because I had this vision. But you could say my entire sort of career has led up to this point.
I just can't stop thinking about this idea of you, I guess maybe 19-year-old, soon to be Harvard senior, going to a temp agency or a staffing agency in Sawtell, asking for a gig. I mean, what were they just like? Did you tell them everything? Who you like? You tell them about your background? Like, I'm just looking for it. And you're just like kind of quietly. They ask you to do like a typing test, and like, did you kind of like reveal like the kind of the caliber of background you had? Or?
Well, if you're looking for a job, yeah. I mean, it's. What's funny is they sent me on a 2-day word processing gig because the office administrator had thrown a stapler at like the top selling salesman in the company. And so they let her go, and they needed these proposals generated, and I knew Microsoft Word, and it's like, oh, can you go help them? Just 2 days to get this done. And it was in a sales office actually in Culver City, and I'm still friends with a number of those people today. They're like, oh, we got to keep this guy. He seems to know what he's doing. So it was a great, it's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, that 2-day temp job.
And that 1 year off you took from college, you found your path.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was the last year. I actually had taken some time earlier. My thing was I wanted to be able to legally order a beer in a bar when I graduated. So I had to push the date back a little bit. I also came to the realization that the label of student, if you're a student, nobody expects anything of you. So I figured I'd try to milk that as long as I could as well.
And it opens up so many doors. Yeah, I speak to so many founders who are either in college still or they're in grad school.
Right.
I'm like, oh no, you leverage that network. You say you're a student, use your UCLA account to reach out to people, because that'll open more doors than anyone saying, hey, I'm a fellow Bruin. That's great. But if I'm a current Bruin, I'm studying right now, people will share their knowledge very openly with students.
Sure. I got a certificate in project management from UCLA Extension.
All right.
Much later, but I think that technically makes me an alumni.
Oh, I'll take it.
Yeah. But it's funny you asked about Harvard. Earlier on in my conversation, or in my career rather, I probably didn't leverage it enough, because I found that if I met someone and I started talking, as soon as I mentioned Harvard, the whole conversation would just take a left turn. And it got boring for me, and I was like wanting to learn about the person I was talking to. So I didn't really, a lot of people mention it, they name drop, like they can't wait to name drop. Only recently have I started doing that. Now I drop it all the time.
And I'd love to just, take a beat on this one for a second. So early stage founders, people who are just starting to find it, are there any tips like that you would recommend for them? Is there something you wish you would have done more of when you were first starting out?
I mentioned earlier that Workdone just went through the Techstars program at the Future of E-commerce with eBay up in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area. And I had always, having been self-employed since college and started multiple companies, I didn't really think that I would benefit from something like that.
Right.
It was the best experience ever. And I wish I'd done it 20 years ago. It's kind of like an MBA just for tech startups without any of the fluff. I know that the program quality is tightly tied to the managing director. And our managing director, his name is Neil Salas Griffin. He came out from Chicago in the middle of the program. He's awesome, and he ran a tight ship, and he was just super present, super smart guy, very accomplished. He actually ran for mayor of Chicago at one point. And, I could call him, I could text him right now. He'd probably respond in a minute. And the thing of it is he's doing 3 cohorts a year, 3 months apiece. So it's like he manages all of this flow, the steady flow of upstart entrepreneurs, and he's very authentic. So, yeah, I would suggest that to a new entrepreneur.
An accelerator and specifically Techstars.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten an MBA, do that. I mean, you can figure it out, but it's a lot faster. And talk about network. I mean, I know, I think Y Combinator is probably a little better known than Techstars, even though I think technically Techstars might be older. They both started around the same time. But the Techstars universe is quite large, over 3,000 companies, and they have a sort of an ethos like give first. It's like, you meet somebody, if you can help them out, just help them out. It's without any expectation of return. It's very sort of karmic, and I love that because stuff does come around, It's not, oh, what can you do for me? Which we've never heard that in Los Angeles before. But it's, I think there's over 50 Techstars programs around the world right now. So chances are there's one near you.
We've had a number of Techstars folks on the show, and they are genuine, and I think they do abide by that, give first mentality. Mm-hmm. Anything else you'd give? Any other tips you'd give to founders who are just starting out? Maybe they're pre-seed, trying to find their way.
It's challenging. As I mentioned, I've started multiple companies, and it's a common mistake, I think, or I can only speak from my experience. I've drawn lines in the sand where I'm like, you know what, if this hasn't happened by this date, I'm going to shut it down. And then I erase that line and I draw another one.
Once you get to it, you keep pushing.
Yeah, and keep going. Yeah. And I've done that multiple times. But then once it's done, it's like, oh man, I'm never going to do that again. And then I do it again. So it's good to actually, not get too caught up in an idea or too married to it, and be ready to shut it down in an orderly fashion and communicate to the stakeholders along the way. Look, this is what it looks like. On the flip side, it's like while you're building the thing, whatever it is, you want to give it time. You gotta you've got this idea, you think it could work, if you try it for a month and nothing happens, that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means it takes longer than a month. So you gotta give it enough time to work. And then once you test the experiment and you're like, oh, you know what, I didn't realize there's this weird thing, the moon aligns with Saturn, or there's a law that goes into effect next month. My idea is not going to work. But you did it, and then you found that out, and now you know. So now you can shut it down and move on to the next experiment, or the next target market, or the next idea. So in one sense, you don't want to quit too early, and then in another sense, you don't want to wait too long.
So how do you know it's time to shut it down?
The age-old question. I don't have an answer to that.
How for you, sounds like you did shut one down. What was the point where you said?
All right, I'll talk about Workdone. So I started Workdone the end of 2017.
Okay.
And the vision was a little different back then. The idea I filed for the patent in 2018. Okay. It came through 5 years later. But
sounds about right.
I actually kept getting I would get a nice reception, But then it seemed like I kept hitting a wall. And at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? I was worried about the window of opportunity closing. I don't think it's actually opened. I think I'm too early. So I actually put Workdone on the shelf. And I said, you know what? This idea is still good. I know it's going to be valid in 2 years, 3 years. I'm going to go off and do some other stuff. And it was the best decision I ever made, which, if I hadn't had all those previous experiences, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have been, the struggling, like banging my head against the wall entrepreneur. But I actually just kind of stopped forcing and let it go. And then as fate would have it, a couple things happened. ChatGPT came out, and then my patent came out. It was delivered and or issued. And so spring of last year, I dusted off Workdone and immediately sort of fell into this Techstars thing. And my attitude was different, so I applied. And it's been really a bit of a rocket ship, actually, since then. So
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And that idea that, it's not, the timing isn't right now, but doesn't mean you can't dust it off later when things will change in a world that you didn't anticipate, but it ends up heading in the direction you did anticipate, and it provides a new opportunity. So how did you, having dusted off Workdone, how did you find your first customers for it?
Those were all referrals. We've had 3 customers to date, and 2 of the 3 were. And then one, I sat on a tech CEO roundtable, and a new CEO came in, and we kind of went around the horn, described what we were working on, and I described it. He's like, "Oh, I could use that." So they're up in the Valley, Canoga Park area, and it's been another great learning from Techstars is how to generate demand. As a consultant, my phone would just ring, or I'd just get an email, and I never really had to look for work. I never had to generate demand. And now we're doing this thing, like we talk about corporate memory. Nobody's heard of that. Nobody knows what it is. It's not a line item on a budget. Yet there's huge value for people, and once they understand what it is, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
Right.
It'll save all kinds of problems." So generating demand has been my focus. And I mentioned before we started, I've been reaching out to various people, doing sort of conversations like this and interviews for blogs, and so I'm beating the bushes, reaching out to my network, and figuring out exactly what messaging works, so that eventually we'll do paid ads, Google, stuff like that, and just start doing the whole funnel thing.
Wow. And going back to that referral you mentioned, it just sounds like it's interesting, to listen to the different ways people get their first customers, because you have such strong founder market fit. It's something you're starting up on, but it's a world you've been really interacting with. You actually were able to find a customer through, a professional organization that you were already a part of, and helped solve a problem that one of your peers had, that you also faced. So, as people consider where they can find those customers, this is a new one for us here at Founders, is, a professional network, an existing professional network, and just kind of sharing what you do with people who have a problem that you've also solved.
Sure. And there's that credibility there as well, because I'd been a member of that network for some years. But with Workdone, we have taken our sort of invention, and there's a number of use cases that it will apply for, but we picked one, and that's what we're drilling down on right now. We've got others in the future, but right now it's order to cash for mid-sized manufacturing companies. So order to cash refers to receiving the sales order, doing order entry, and then fulfillment, and then invoicing, and then collections. And that whole process is considered order to cash. And we instrument the desktops across those departments, because an order passes through all of them. And then we can identify areas of inefficiency, bottlenecks, ways that we can improve cash flow, shorten the days outstanding. We can increase this fulfillment cycle time, so stuff doesn't take so long, or there's no late deliveries, or reduce the late deliveries, as well as sort of increase the order margin. Instead of giving up 20% of the order value to processing, you can reduce it to 10%. I mean, that's significant. So that's our first use case, and I've been leveraging my network, but we're very close to going out to mid-sized manufacturing companies, CFOs, COOs. Like, if you're having order-to-cash problems, call us. I mean, you can call a consulting firm, Ernst & Young or Price Waterhouse, and they'll send a small army and charge you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and disrupt everybody. Or you can go with us, and the data that we're going to capture is way more granular and way more precise, and it removes all subjectivity. It's completely data-driven. So, we think that once we have a few of those sort of success stories and we start waving that flag, people will come running.
Oh, no, I mean, you're solving a problem that you've been studying and facing, and I think that
I've subcontracted to Accenture and Deloitte and IBM, and I see kind of how they do it.
Yeah.
So this is not that. Let's just say there's some fat that can be cut out of all of that, like how their methodology.
A lot less overhead as well.
Yeah.
So grounding this in LA, Joe, it sounds like you've had several stints here. I'd love to, if you have like a most LA moment, something that sticks out as distinctly LA.
You know what? I mean, this has nothing to do with
it doesn't have to do with tech, yeah.
Oh,
no.
okay. It does have to do with traffic.
Not. Oh, traffic?
Yes.
All right.
No, this was surprising to me because I drive, one of my cars is a 2006 Toyota Prius.
Nice.
I'm going to drive it until the wheels fall off. It's a great car.
Yeah.
I was sitting at you'll probably know this intersection where Fairfax hits La Cienega. It dead ends. I was there at the red light, 3 p.m. on a Friday, and the light turned green, and this puff of smoke came up from under my hood. I'm like, and it was just dead. I mean, I had power, but it was not, the engine was not engaging. Long story short, I sitting there for a little while, called AAA. While I was sitting in the car with the hazards on, 4 separate people, all different types of people, came up to ask, oh, do you need jumpers? Do you need to push the car aside? Are you okay? And I'm like, what city am I in? This is not Los Angeles. It actually made me feel really good about my city. And it was a complete surprise. Of course, once, like later on, I got out of the car and I was standing on the sidewalk, and there was a guy driving like an SUV, and he was just like, looked at me and he looked at the car. He's like, deadbeat. You could tell he was thinking deadbeat. But it was like, dude, my car broke down. What do you want? But it was really a pleasant, just unexpected experience. It made me feel real good about like my fellow Angelinos.
Oh man, I love this story, Joe. Yeah, I mean, there are good people here
There
in
are
LA.
good people.
I was bracing myself for another traffic story, but this was the happy ending.
It was. And then the tow truck driver came and took me over to Toyota of Culver City, and we had a nice chat. He was from Ethiopia. He asked me if I was from Ethiopia. I'm like, I was born in San Diego, actually.
not super close.
But it was, it messed up my oddly enough, Techstars Space, that program had a demo day that afternoon at the car museum over on Fairfax and Wilshire.
Right.
Peterson Museum.
Yeah.
And I was going to try to go to that, although it was sold out, so I was going to have to sneak in, but I didn't get to go. But it all worked out just as well.
Kind of push your 2006 Prius into the automotive museum.
That would have been funny.
The easy way to sneak in the back.
Should have told the tow truck driver to take it there.
Got a new car for the collection, everyone. Well, we've been talking with Joe Rogers, the CEO at Workdone. Hey, Joe, and where can folks find Workdone?
Workdone.ai. That's the website. My name is Joseph Rogers, Josephrogers. My friends call me Joe. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Let's see, where else? LinkedIn's the best place. I don't tweet much, so
Or X. Or
I don't X
much.
much either. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming down here, Joe. This has been great. Thank you for sharing so much with us. I think there's some great takeaways for folks here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, Nearshore and Unita. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. And if you like what you hear, please smash that subscribe button. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Founders in LA.